The billionaire's daughter had the money, the name, and a future written in gold. Yet she was failing every exam. Then a black janitor everyone else ignored taught her one lesson that changed her grades and her life forever. Stay with us to see how one overlooked voice changed everything. And tell us in the comments, who is the one teacher in your life you'll never forget? Isabella Sinclair's life looked flawless from the outside. Her father, Richard Sinclair, was a San Francisco tech magnate with a fortune that seemed limitless. She'd grown up in designer clothes, summering in Europe, photographed at charity galas before she could spell her own name. At 17, she attended Westbridge International Academy in Palo Alto, an institution where tuition alone could buy a house. She hadn't earned her place there through merit. The Sinclair name and a quiet transfer of funds had done the work for her. Inside, the marble halls lined with portraits of diplomats, CEOs, and Nobel laureates. Isabella was known for her expensive taste and her academic collapse. Her grades were a quiet scandal. Teachers let her pass to avoid jeopardizing the school's relationship with her father. Classmates treated her like a prize or a prop, never a peer. She pretended not to care. After all, why should grades matter when her inheritance was already secured? At home, the distance between father and daughter was measured not in miles, but in conversations never had. Richard was a man of precision, capable of dismantling billion-dollar deals but unable, or unwilling, to connect with his only child. When yet another call came from the school about her performance, he didn't raise his voice. He simply told her, "You're an embarrassment to the Sinclair name. If you worked for me, you'd be fired." When she answered that she wasn't his employee, his reply was colder. "The world doesn't care. Either you become someone, or you'll be just another rich kid with no spine. And I won't carry you." The next morning, her world shifted. The credit cards were canceled. The sports car was gone. The driver was replaced with a school bus pass. As she stepped off that bus in the January chill, head held high despite the stares, she noticed someone she'd never truly seen before. An older black woman mopping the hallway floor. The woman's posture was straight, her eyes calm, her uniform faded but her presence intact. Isabella didn't think twice. Just the janitor, she thought, and kept walking. She wouldn't think of her again until weeks later, until the day she heard her speak. It happened on a morning colder than most. The fog clung to the academy's gates, swallowing the polished brickwork and manicured lawns. Isabella walked quickly, her hands buried in the pockets of a tailored coat, trying to ignore the whispers from a group of students as she passed. She was used to it, envy mixed with ridicule, but something in her felt heavier than usual. She rounded the east hallway and saw the janitor again, her mop moving in slow, deliberate arcs across the floor. This time, there was a faint hum of music from her earbuds, and her lips moved as if she were speaking to herself. Isabella might have kept walking if the words hadn't cut through the quiet. "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." The voice was steady, almost conversational, but it landed with an unexpected weight. Isabella stopped mid-step, the echo of the phrase lodging somewhere deep. "What did you just say?" she asked before she could stop herself. The woman looked up, meeting her eyes without hesitation. "It means you might finally be ready to learn," she said simply, then turned back to her work as if the exchange had been nothing. Isabella stood there for a few seconds, caught between confusion and a strange pull, before continuing to class. The phrase followed her through the day like an invisible thread, tugging at her thoughts during lectures she barely listened to, and at lunch with friends who cared more about gossip than truth. That evening, she found herself scrolling aimlessly on her phone, trying to drown out the unease, but the words kept resurfacing, ready to learn. She wondered why they bothered her so much. She had everything, didn't she? A week later, the tension in her life reached a breaking point. Another set of failing test scores arrived. Math, history, literature. There were no mercy grades this time, no quiet favors. Her father received the news before she could hide it. The confrontation was short and brutal. "You are running out of chances, Isabella. I will not bankroll failure," Richard said, his voice as cold as the marble floors of their home. She gave him silence in return, but inside, panic and defiance churned together. The next morning, instead of slipping out through the main entrance, after classes, Isabella took the side corridor toward the cafeteria. She found the janitor again, mopping up a spill with the same deliberate movements. Isabella stopped a few feet away. "Were you a teacher?" she asked. The woman straightened, removed one earbud, and answered without hesitation. Professor, literature and philosophy at Howard University. Before life taught me other lessons. There was no trace of self-pity in her voice, only quiet fact. Why are you here then? Isabella pressed. Marion Carter's gaze didn't waver. Because the truth costs more than most are willing to pay. I exposed a powerful man for plagiarizing. I refused his hush money. They shut me out. Then, not long after, I lost my son in a hit and run. On his way to one of my lectures, the weight of the words settled between them, heavy and unshakable. For the first time in a long time, Isabella didn't have a clever retort. I want you to teach me, she said quietly. Marion studied her for a long moment before replying. On one condition, you leave your name, your money, and your pride at the door. Start from zero. She reached into her bag and pulled out a plain spiral notebook. Every morning before class, and every evening after, we meet here. You write what you've learned, not facts, truth. Isabella hesitated only a second before taking the notebook. For reasons she didn't fully understand, she knew she would show up. The first morning felt unreal. The campus was still asleep, the winter fog clinging to the stone paths like a heavy veil. Isabella walked through the side entrance, the notebook clutched in her hand, as if it might vanish if she loosened her grip. The silence of the halls was different at this hour. No chatter, no clanging lockers, just the hum of faint overhead lights. She found Marion in the east wing, polishing the floor in slow, precise circles. The janitor's cart was pushed to the side, a thermos of coffee resting on the handle. You came, Marion said without looking up. You gave me a time, Isabella replied, setting the notebook on a nearby desk. Marion removed her gloves, folded them neatly, and gestured toward a chair. Sit. We'll begin, but not with what you expect. She placed a battered paperback on the desk. James Baldwin's The Fire next time. Read the first 2 pages silently. Then tell me what they feel like, not what they mean. Isabella frowned. You want feelings, not answers? Exactly, Marion said. Answers are for people who think they're done learning. We're not there. That first hour was unlike anything Isabella had ever experienced in a classroom. Marion didn't correct her vocabulary or mark her mistakes. She asked questions that landed in places Isabella didn't even know could be reached. Why did this sentence feel like it belonged to you? What truth did the author dare to say that you've never spoken aloud? By the time the bell for first period rang, Isabella had filled 2 pages with thoughts she didn't know she'd been carrying. The days began to form a rhythm. Mornings with Baldwin, Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston. Evenings scribbling reflections in the notebook. Marion's red ink didn't mark wrong answers. It carved out empty spaces. This sentence is pretty but hollow. Rewrite it with your soul. Sometimes the rewrites took hours. Sometimes Isabella stared at the page in frustration until Marion simply said, Good. That means you're close. It wasn't long before she started noticing things she'd never paid attention to before. A classmate who never spoke in group projects, but always had the most annotated notes. A teacher whose lectures were brilliant but always cut short for lack of time. The cafeteria worker who remembered every student's name. It was as if Marion had given her a new lens, one that made the unseen impossible to ignore. The change didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, as Isabella sat in the empty library writing, 2 girls from her social circle walked by. Guess the princess found herself a hobby, one of them said, snapping a photo. Later that night, it appeared online with the caption, Sinclair's princess cleaning floors with the help. The comments were worse, laughing emojis, sneers about slumming it. Isabella was ready to delete her account in anger when Marion saw the post. She studied it for a moment, then handed the phone back. You don't measure depth with a shallow ruler, she said. The sting in Isabella's chest didn't fade immediately, but the words settled in deeper than the mockery. Quietly, the library began to fill. First, one student asked if they could join their sessions. Then another. Within a month, there were 7 regulars. Students of all backgrounds, all struggling in different ways. They read aloud, argued, cried, rewrote, and argued again. The library felt alive for the first time in years, lit not just by lamps, but by the spark of voices discovering themselves. But the more alive the room became, the more attention it drew from the wrong people. And Marion knew, before Isabella did, that it couldn't stay hidden forever. It began with a summon. Marion was called to the assistant principal's office one gray afternoon. The meeting lasted less than 10 minutes, but the look on her face when she returned to the East Wing told Isabella more than words could. "They want me to stop," Marion said simply, resuming her mopping as though nothing had changed. "Stop what?" Isabella asked, though she already knew. "Meeting with students. They say I'm not a certified instructor here, that it's not in my job description." Marion's tone was calm, but there was an edge beneath it. "That's ridiculous. You're helping us." Marion rested her hands on the mop handle, meeting Isabella's eyes. "Systems don't attack what's broken. They attack what works." She gave a small, knowing smile. "And we've been working too well." For a week, they kept meeting in the library anyway, the group growing quieter but no less determined. Then, without warning, it ended. Isabella arrived one morning to find the library dark and Marion's cart gone. By lunch, the whispers had reached her. Marion had been fired. No goodbyes, no explanation beyond budget cuts. Her coat was gone from its hook. Her nameplate on the custodial door had been removed. The days that followed felt hollow. Isabella still carried her notebook, but the pages stayed blank. Teachers noticed her silence in class. Friends noticed she skipped lunch to sit alone in the courtyard. It wasn't that she'd forgotten what Marion taught her. It was that the person who made her believed she could change had been erased from the building as if she had never existed. Then came the announcement, printed in bold letters on the hallway bulletin board: Senior Speech Contest Theme, what it means to win in life open to families and the community. The contest was a major event at Westbridge. For most students, it was a chance to polish their resumes for elite universities. For Isabella, it was something else entirely. That evening, she sat at her desk at home, flipping through the pages of her notebook. Marion's red ink danced between her own scrawled sentences. Learning is transformation. Pride is a trap disguised as protection. You don't need permission to become someone new. Isabella closed the book slowly. She didn't need permission. The writing took nights of quiet work. No rehearsed polish, no clever quotes meant to impress a panel. Just truth. She didn't think about the judges or the audience. She thought about Marion, about the woman who had given her a reason to wake up before dawn and fill blank pages with something real. When the night of the contest arrived, the auditorium was packed. Parents in tailored coats filled the front rows. Students lined the aisles, and college scouts sat in the back with clipboards. Isabella wore a plain navy dress, her hair pulled back, the notebook in her hand. No one in the crowd knew yet what she was about to say. Her name was called, and the sound seemed to hang in the air longer than it should have. Isabella rose from her seat, the plain notebook in her hand feeling heavier than it had all week. The stage lights washed over her as she walked forward, each step echoing in the sudden quiet. She reached the podium, glanced at the crowd, her classmates in neatly pressed uniforms, parents in tailored coats, teachers lined in the wings, and somewhere in the dim rows, the man who had raised her but never truly seen her. She gripped the edges of the podium and took a steadying breath. "They say I have everything," she began, her voice steady but quiet. "But for most of my life, I didn't have the one thing that mattered. Someone who believed in me." A ripple of surprise passed through the room. She wasn't my teacher, not officially. She had no office, no authority, just a mop and a heart big enough to see through my armor. Her gaze swept the crowd, stopping briefly on the faces of a few classmates who had mocked her in the halls. She didn't just clean the floors, she cleared the fog in my head. She showed me that I had been walking through life with my eyes half shut, measuring myself by a last name instead of the truth I carried inside. She made me see the people I ignored, the voices I'd never heard, the questions I'd never dared to ask. And then they fired her, because systems fear what works. A few parents shifted uncomfortably. One teacher looked down at the floor. Isabella's fingers traced the edge of the notebook before she opened it. "She told me learning is transformation. That winning isn't about being rich or powerful. It's about becoming someone worth remembering. She told me that your name is only as strong as the way you use it, and that sometimes you have to let it go entirely to find yourself." Her voice softened. "If she were here tonight, I'd tell her she's the reason I'm standing here at all. I'd tell her that every word I've written in this notebook was because she made me believe my thoughts mattered. I'd tell her she saved my life without ever asking for credit." She closed the notebook gently and looked out again. "So what does it mean to win in life? It means waking up. It means letting go of the walls you hide behind, finding your truth, and using it to lift someone else higher than you ever thought possible. That's the kind of victory no trophy can match, and no system can take away. For a long moment, the room was utterly silent. No rustle of paper, no cough from the back row. She could hear her own breathing in the microphone. Then, one person clapped, another joined, and then the sound grew, filling the auditorium until it became a wave. Applause. Cheers, the scrape of chairs as the audience rose to their feet. Some students whistled, others shouted her name, but Isabella didn't look for them. Her eyes found her instead. In the back row, partially hidden by the shadow of the balcony, Marion stood. No uniform now, just a simple sweater and scarf. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, her shoulders trembling, and a tear slipped down her cheek. When their eyes met, Isabella felt the world go still again. No sound, no crowd, just the quiet understanding between the woman who had taught her to see and the girl who had finally learned how. The ovation followed her off the stage, spilling into the hallway as parents and students clustered in small knots, still talking about her words. Isabella didn't linger to hear their opinions. She stepped outside into the cool night air, the notebook pressed against her chest. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about how she had been seen. She was thinking about what she had said. By morning, her speech was everywhere. A student had recorded it and posted it online. The caption was simple: "Billionaire's daughter speaks the truth about learning." Within hours, the video spread beyond the school, shared by alumni, amplified by educators, reposted by activists. Headlines followed: "Billionaire's daughter credits school janitor for saving her life." The story trended for days, eclipsing gossip about her family's wealth. Some praised her courage, others criticized her for speaking against the school. But no one could ignore the message. And in the middle of it all, Isabella received a short text from an unknown number. "Proud of you, M." For Marion, the ripple effect was immediate. She began receiving invitations to speak at community forums and universities. A progressive college offered her a guest lecturer position, then a permanent role. The woman the system had pushed into silence was being asked, at last, to speak. Isabella graduated that spring, not with perfect grades, but with work she had fought for and understood. She turned down Ivy League offers and instead chose a small college known for its programs in social justice and education. When reporters asked why, she said, "Because I want to teach the way she taught me, where no one has to ask to be seen." Months later, she stood outside a modest house on a quiet street, an envelope in her hand. Marion opened the door, surprised but smiling. "You didn't have to come all this way." "I did," Isabella said, handing her the envelope. Inside was her diploma, her college acceptance letter, and a handwritten proposal. "I want to start something, a place where anyone can learn without fear or shame. I want to call it the Marion Carter Institute." Marion's eyes filled with tears. "Why me?" "Because everything I am now started with you," Isabella said. Marion held her gaze for a long moment. "Only if we do it together." The institute opened that autumn in a renovated community space in the heart of the city. It offered mentorship, evening classes, and open writing circles. Students who had been written off began to flourish. Some were there to improve grades, others to find their voice, but all left with more than they came in with. The city noticed. Awards came, articles were written, donors stepped forward. But the real reward was quieter. A 12-year-old scholarship student handing Marion a notebook and saying, "This place made me feel smart for the first time." Even Richard came to the opening. He stood in the back, silent, as Isabella spoke about justice, humility, and the power of seeing others. When the crowd dispersed, father and daughter met outside. "I didn't expect to cry," Richard admitted. "I didn't expect to forgive you," Isabella replied. They shook hands before they hugged, not as billionaire and heir, but as two people trying to understand each other at last. Years later, Isabella stood on another stage, this time to accept a National Education Award. She paused before the microphone, scanning the audience. They said, "I failed everything," she began, "until I learned one thing that changed. My life, greatness doesn't come from being seen. It comes from seeing others. And sometimes the person who teaches you the most isn't in a suit. She's in work shoes, quoting philosophers while no one's listening. Marion Carter didn't just save my grades. She saved my life." The room erupted in applause. Marion, seated in the front row, smiled. And in that moment, Isabella knew The work they had started would outlive them both. Long after the award ceremonies, the media coverage, and the applause faded, Isabella kept the same notebook Marion had given her that first morning. Its pages were worn soft at the edges, the red ink still as sharp as the day it was written. Sometimes late at night in her small office at the Institute, she would open it to the first blank page she had stared at for so long and remember the girl who had thought she knew everything. She understood now that Marion's greatest lesson was never about literature or philosophy. It was about seeing the person in front of you, the life behind their eyes, the weight they carried silently. It was about refusing to look away from the truth, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it cost you. And in that, Isabella realized something else. Winning in life wasn't a single moment, a speech, or an award. It was in the quiet work done every day, in the students who walked into the Institute with slumped shoulders and left with their heads held high. It was in the father who now and then stopped by just to sit in the back and listen, not as a billionaire, but as a man learning to see his daughter for who she had become. The rest was simple. She would keep building, keep teaching, and keep the promise she had made on that stage years ago, to live in a way worth remembering. And maybe that's the question we all have to face one day, when your name is gone, your power is gone, and all that's left is the truth. Will anyone be able to say their life was better because you were in it? Let us know in the comments how this story resonated with you. If stories like this help you see differently, join us, subscribe, share, and keep a notebook nearby. We're building more rooms where voices rise. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.